Hey everybody, Joe Baker here with the Edit Bay. Today I'm going to be making a video I probably should have tackled a couple of years ago. I'm going to give you 3 tips that everyone should know before you get involved with post-processing software. Alright, before we dive too deeply into this, I will say that if you've been following me for a while, you're probably already well aware of how these applications operate. But I've had a lot of success over the years in wording things this way with my film students, so I'm going to go ahead and tackle the basic operations of video editing applications, even including visual effects software such as After Effects. So, when it comes to editing your video, the first thing that's really important for you to understand is that video editing applications don't actually edit your video. They reference them. So what has to happen before you even launch your video editing app is you need to have your footage organized in a way that it's in the same place throughout every editing session that you're going to have. So I have everything right here on my portable hard drive. I want to edit together some video that I shot with my drone. I want to be able to rearrange the clips, shorten them, color correct them, and so on so that I can share them with friends and family. So I have everything organized in the same folder. And I'm not going to rename them, that's not important, but it's really important that these files don't move. Here's why. When you first launch your video editing application of choice, right now I'm about to launch Premiere, it's going to ask you to create a project file, which brings me to my second tip. Project files are small. They tend to be kilobytes small. And if you understand that the project file is small, the rest of what I'm going to show you is going to make a lot of sense. So we're going to click on New Project. It's going to ask us to name the project file. And I'm just going to say this is... At this step in the process, we need to import our video footage. And this is what confuses a lot of people. Just by using the word import, that kind of implies that we're going to be bringing video files into the program. That's really not the case. The process of importing is basically just telling your video editing app where are your source footage files. You're basically going to create a path name so that Premiere understands where on my computer all of my video clips are. That's it. Nothing goes into the project file. We're simply creating a connection. So I'm going to double click on here so I can navigate to a couple of my video files. And I'm just going to go over here. Again, I'm navigating to that portable RAID. And let's just do 1 and 2. Now, with my video clips imported or connected, I can simply, in Premiere anyway, right-click on this, select New Sequence from Clip, and we end up with this clip down here on our timeline. Now, here's what's important. Any edit that I do to this clip here in Premiere will not be reflected in the actual source file. So, for example, I could trim this, which means make it shorter. Let's get it. Let's just fly over these things. Trim it really, really short. And then let's do a real obvious color correction to this just to prove a point. Let's suck all the color out of it. Let's make this a grayscale image. We can go for black and white. Okay. If I go over here to the source file, mind you, that is clip number 1. If I double click on this to play it, it'll launch my media player and it'll play the video file in its entirety. Notice that the clip is at its full length and it's not grayscale, it's still in color at this point. Your video editing app is going to use what are called path names to identify the location of your source media. So even if you've never heard the term path name before, I'm pretty sure you understand the concept. This is the path name up here. It's on PC under my L drive in the pictures folder, Skunk Harbor, P3, and then of course the name of the file down here. Now, because it needs to see this exact path, whatever the path was when you imported it, that's the path that it needs in order to stay connected. If you change the name of the file, or if you move the file to a different folder, or say you unplug the RAID drive that the files are actually on, the project file will no longer be able to see that media. And you'll get an error message up here on your screen that says something to the effect of media offline or connection terminated or something like that. All right, so here's the third tip that I want to share with you guys today. If the project file is really small and video editing applications don't actually edit our video, what do they do? Think of it this way. If I drag this clip out onto the timeline, and let's say I've spent, a few hours editing this project in numerous different ways, trimming all of my clips, laying everything out here, adding sound effects, music beds, so on, maybe some title cards. What I've done down here on the timeline is I've created a set of instructions for writing a completely new video file. And that completely new video file will be your movie. So if we come back over here to, again, the source media folder, these are all video files. These are the video files that I'm going to use in this project. And when I'm done creating my set of instructions down here on the timeline, I'm going to write a new one of these. I'm going to write a completely new video file that I can name, share on the web, and do whatever I want to do with it. That process is called rendering, publishing, sharing, exporting. Just depends on the NLE that you're using. It does go by several names, but that's basically it. Everything that you do down here on the timeline is telling Premiere or telling your NLE exactly what you want it to do at each particular frame. So I'm saying right here, I want this frame to be black and white with the contrast boosted, and on the next frame, I want it to be the same thing. On the next frame, I want this sound effect to kick in. On the next frame, I want this music bed to kick in, and so on and so forth. So this may seem like some really basic concepts here, and of course, if you've been editing for years, you're well aware of this. But I've taught video production for several years now, and there are some rookie mistakes that I run into even now, where we have students trying to submit films by submitting the project file without any of its corresponding assets. Or we have students who cannot bring up their project file after several editing sessions. They're getting the dreaded media offline warning, and they don't understand why, because their source media was on a different drive that they don't have with them that day. So understanding how these things work is extremely important, making sure that we have this down before we get too involved in a really complicated video project. If you're a photographer and you're starting to play around with video, an easy way to think of this is that video editing applications work like Adobe's Lightroom and Adobe's Camera Raw, and that they simply reference your original raw footage. That file is basically useless until you export it, share it, save it, whatever lingo they happen to use. It's not like Photoshop files, where the assets such as the photographs and other elements that you use are all contained in the PSD, which is why PSDs get rather large, like megabytes big, because all of the necessary assets are contained in the PSD. Video editing apps, that's simply not practical. It's just not. It would be gigabytes huge. Long movies would be terabytes huge if all of the assets were contained in the project file. Well, I hope you found these 3 tips useful. If you're new to the Edit Bay and you'd like to see more quick tips like this, I also do product reviews on this channel. Please consider subscribing. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please drop them in the box below. Until next time, I'm Joe Baker.